On this episode of Who Dem.
Really, the job of an artist, more than making the art, I think, is learning how to be a salesperson. And yes, there is some risk of getting caught. I had to make some fast breaks a few times, but you know, it was just fun.
You said something a little earlier. I have to ask about your street art and climbing things. So, what was your tagline out there?
I think that this is like effectively designed by the people who actually control the internet. And I don't think it's going to go away because it's obviously been incredibly profitable for them.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Who Dem podcast. My name is Damian Galvan, and as always, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Representative Gil Cisneros. And today we have a very, very, very special guest joining us. You're laughing at it, but as I was doing research for this episode, you have done everything. I don't think that there's like you are a jack of all trades. I did an interview with this guy named Jason Bosky a couple years ago, and he was like an airline pilot, and he was a politician, and he was all of these different things. I think you might have outdone him.
Well, I've never flown a plane or served in any form of United States government at any level. So I don't know if
we got books, screenplays.
I've done some writing.
Podcast,
Sure, made a few podcasts, a few TV shows here and there.
So yeah, out of all of the things that you've done, there's so many. Do you have a favorite that you just really go back to and you're like, this is my favorite thing that I'm the most proud of?
I don't know if I have much pride in anything that I've done per se, but I think what I find most kind of creatively fulfilling is probably writing novels.
You have a couple interesting, really, really interesting novels. I was looking at The Average American Male in particular, and the Average American series.
My first one, yeah.
Yeah, the debut novel, and I think it's so. I was looking at some of the reviews for it, and I'm really curious about it because it was criticized for being misogynistic. It perpetuated misogynistic stereotypes, and someone said that it lacked depth. Are people missing the point, or are you just a shit writer? I can't.
I mean, that's up for interpretation. I think that's on a per person basis. You'd have to ask that question. But I mean, I wrote that book when I was like 25. I think, or something, 26, roughly around that age. And the world was obviously drastically different. There wasn't at that time, I don't want to out my own age here, but I am kind of old. At that time, the internet was like not what it is now. There was really no social media or anything. I think the world was just very different. But there was kind of this, I remember at the time, there was a book called He's Just Not That Into You. And it was a gigantic, massive bestseller. And it was kind of lauded as, this is how guys really think about relationships. And I just remember being a guy in my early 20s and being like, I don't think so. Let me go ahead and write this book that was kind of it is a fictional novel, but it was kind of meant, at least for me at the time, to be an answer to that book. And yeah, the main character is very misogynistic. It's kind of the inner life of a guy in his early 20s accepting the fact that romantic relationships are not going to be maybe what he had hoped and dreamed they would be.
Yeah, I think that's what I find a little bit ironic because the book is titled The Average American Male, and people were disappointed that the protagonist was acting like Charlie Sheen and not Mr. Rogers. I think that would be the average American male is the way that it was depicted. It was like lack of depth and a little bit misogynistic, especially in 2007. Or it was around 2007.
I think that's when it came out roughly. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Did you when you were approaching writing the sequel for it, The Average American Marriage, what changed in that time period?
For that character or for me personally? I mean, not much change for me, I guess. I had started selling TV shows and movies and stuff, so maybe my prose got a little more influenced by like writing screenplays, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I just wanted to kind of progress with that character for as long as I could, and it turned out to be 2 books. That was it. I had grand plans for like a 30-book series. But it was basically just going to try and chart like an average guy's life, what I perceive that to be. So in that sequel, the character is married, he has kids, he's cheating on his wife. I have never been married. I do not have kids. This is a work of fiction. But it was meant to just kind of like, again, chronicle like what is happening to the average American male as technology is changing, as generations are moving in and out of prominence in American culture, both in the workforce and elsewhere. But yeah, I always had intended to write a sequel to it at the very least, and potentially more books. Who knows? Maybe I'll pick it back up at some point.
Have you ever gotten into writing, Representative? Do you like what would you say is your creative outlet?
God, I don't know. Um, I want to write a book. I've always wanted to write a book, but the actual um, thought of sitting down and taking the time to actually do it, it's to me, it's a little bit overwhelming. And I really kind of admire anybody who can kind of sit down and kind of do that and really dedicate themselves to just writing a book. I mean, sometimes I think writing an op-ed is like, my God, like everything that goes into that is just, that's like, 500 words maybe, right? But but making the commitment to a novel or something like that is really a lot, and it's very admirable.
If you were to write a book, what would it be about? Would you do like a history book, or would it be an autobiography?
The autobiography has kind of been something that I always thought, but I've always kind of been more admired the screenplays. I think, right? To me, I kind of, I actually, when I was in college, I tried to take, I couldn't get into the class because it had already filled up, but I did want to take a screenwriting class just to kind of learn, and the thought of like, okay, if I ever made a movie, I'd wanted to. I actually wanted to make a movie about the thought I had about a man too, right, and his life and how he kind of chosen his career over, kind of a way of more happiness.
Sure.
So I always thought would be kind of a good idea to kind of focus on that, right?
A novel I'm working on right now is kind of about that. It's called Plastic Man, and it's about a guy who works in the plastic industry selling basically like the raw materials to make every water bottle, Coke bottle, blah, 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 to all these giant companies. And he works for a kind of almost like a Dow petrochemical type company down in Galveston. They're poisoning the water, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, how much money does it take to make this guy like okay with the lies he has to say and the poison he has to deliver to the world?
Right. Yeah. No, I would love to see that once you get it done.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah. We'll see when it happens. Yeah. But I'm working on that one right now.
Was the idea when you started, or I guess the way I'll frame this question is, did you approach it like, I want to be an author, or I want to be a screenwriter? Or did they just kind of naturally happen?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, when I was a little kid, I just liked making art of all kinds, and still do. I did street art for a while out here in LA until I blew an ACL in my late 30s and like couldn't climb buildings anymore. But I just like making art of all kinds. And what I found kind of when I graduated college is the real game of it is trying to figure out how to make money making art. You have to really, the job of an artist, more than making the art, I think, is learning how to be a salesperson. And that's really what, it took me 5 to 7 years, I would say, after graduating college to really figure out like, okay, how do I convince somebody to pay me for these things I'm writing or making or whatever?
Yeah, no, that's definitely super interesting. And I'm sure that you're also finding that with like content creation, that it's like you can have a really creative idea, and then there's different ways that you kind of have to approach actually getting that idea from concept to being something that, first of all, people want to watch, and then second of all, like someone is interested in actually producing. I'm curious about the first time that one of your books or one of your works actually got turned into a film. I was looking at the incredible Burn Wonderstone, and I just saw that got turned into a film, and I was like, oh, that's cool. It got turned into a film, and then I was looking at the cast list, and it was Steve Carell. It was right. It was Steve Carell, and it was Jim Carrey. Yeah.
Steve Buscemi. I remember going to go see that movie. Yeah.
Oh, well, I hope you enjoyed it.
No, I did. I thought it was hilarious. The whole. The idea of the Steve Carell character, right? Who was the main character in the movie, trying to date a woman or bring her home, and he had the whole NDA that he wanted her to sign. Yeah.
It was just about like Vegas magicians. I always have found that all magicians really, but like Vegas magicians specifically as a lifestyle to me was always something so bizarre. There's only like, a handful of these people who live this weird life where they're like coming up with magic tricks, and there's giant warehouses in Vegas where they store their big elaborate stage tricks and stuff. And that kind of thinking about that weird little world just got my brain going. And I think I always tend to write like comedy more than anything else. So I was like, a comedy set in that world would be hilarious. And so, I wrote that screenplay, sold it to New Line. 250 people rewrote it over the course of that. I had to go to WJ arbitration to get credit and blah, blah, blah. It was a whole mess. But the movie did get made.
Yeah. No, that magician whole thing, Vegas magician part, right? It's still live and thriving in Vegas, right? And it kind of makes you wonder. Yeah. The other part of that is who actually goes and watches these shows.
I do. I've been to a lot of them. I love magic. I think it's just like such a bizarre thing that we do as human beings, that people spend their entire lives dedicating themselves to like getting their manual dexterity down to be able to do like super up close sleight of hand like David Blaine can do or whatever. It's just a strange thing that humanity is obviously fascinated by, because the people at the top of that heap are making boatloads of money. There aren't very many of them, but like if you can get that good, you're living just this, again, bizarre lifestyle where you're like living in penthouses in Vegas and your job is to trick people all day long.
Oh yeah. True confession, I actually did go to a David Copperfield show one time.
What year was this?
Oh my God. It was, I think it was that was a long time ago, 1997.
Okay. I went to one in the 80s that was put on at the Amarillo Civic Center, because when I was a kid, that's where my family lived, in Amarillo, Texas. So I also saw David Copperfield live on stage as a child.
Well, I was not born when either of these things happened, so I have not been any stand-up or any magic shows. I was showing my girlfriend David Blaine for the first time, though, and I was explaining to her, I was like, look, like there's this magician. I was getting really into David Blaine's story because it's super interesting, especially now that he's not really doing it as much because of his daughter and all of the stunts that he was putting himself through. And I was like, yeah, like let's watch some of these magicians clips. And she looks at me and she's like, this is not magic. Like this guy is torturing himself. And it's like, why would you show me this? Like,
well, that's the part that was funny about the movie too, right? Is the Jim Carrey character was basically, where's the magic, right? He's just kind of torturing himself.
Yeah, he was meant to be kind of like a mix of Chris Angel and David Blaine, kind of like as one guy.
What got you into podcasting? Because I feel like you were early on the side of things. I feel like a lot of people now, they want to get into
Damian,
it.
Before we could go into that, you said something a little earlier. I have to ask, about your street art and climbing things. So what was your tagline out there? Where can we see some of you driving down the 405 there?
At this point, this was at least 10 years ago is when I was like pretty active around LA. But nothing is still up, I don't think. But the thing I used to use a lot was a phrase, "none of this is real." And that was like, I put that everywhere that I could, mainly around like Melrose and Fairfax. That little district at the time was kind of a hub of street art. All the big street artists in LA were like dropping stuff there. So I tried to get my name out there a little bit and put my things out. And for a minute there, I was like selling stuff in galleries, and it was interesting I really viewed that as kind of a hobby. But I was able to like, again, figure out the salesmanship of it and turn it into a little lucrative kind of side business at the time. And it always made for like a good story in any general meeting where I was like pitching movie ideas or whatever to some studio executive. And I'd say like, oh yeah, and I do street art. And at that time, like my shit was everywhere. So they would invariably be like, oh my God, I've seen that thing. I drive by that all the time, or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, I loved it. I just like the idea. Street art specifically is intriguing to me because most art it's an object or whatever. An artist makes it. It goes in a gallery or it goes in a museum, and the patron has to make the conscious decision. I'm going to go into this building and view this art or experience what the installation, whatever it may be. Street art, though, is completely different. It's basically saying corporations are essentially the only entities that get to determine what our physical world looks like in terms of billboards, advertising, even what the buildings look like. But street art kind of reclaims that and says, no, I live in this society too. I live in this physical area. I'm going to get to decide a little bit of what it looks like also. And I'm just going to throw some shit up on a wall. You can take it down if you want. If the city wants to take it down or the people who own the building want to take it down, fine. But for a minute, it's going to be up there. And yes, there is some risk of getting caught. I had to make some fast breaks a few times. But, it was just fun. It was like a thrilling kind of thing to do in my early 30s.
So you don't have anything on the abandoned... not completed hotel out there in downtown LA? Nothing left?
I've been to that place. No, but I still, I very much appreciate the street art that exists now. It has kind of waned. Like the community of street artists is not what it used to be. All the big ones got super famous and have moved on, like Monopoly and stuff. But, Yeah, I still every once in a while will see something that somebody throws up on like the side of an abandoned building or whatever, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. I still feel like I got an eye for it. I just don't have the physical tools to get out there and be doing it anymore.
There was a really big artist. I think it was like a year ago that he was trending. His name was like Banksy in the UK. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him.
Banksy?
Yeah, I think it was Banksy. Was it? Am I crazy?
Banksy is basically like the Leonardo da Vinci of street art. He's the most famous street artist that's ever lived. He's worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
Well,
all of his pieces sell for an insane amount of money.
That should tell you how much I know about street art. Because I don't know anything. I got this on my For You page, and I was like, oh, cool, yeah, this is popping off. And now, I didn't even know his name. I was like, I hope the name is right. So when you recognized it, I was
correct,
like, I did something good. But no, I
for
saw
a
that
long time there was controversy about who really Banksy is, who's the
That's
secret
what I was
identity,
curious
but
about,
that
right?
has been revealed over the past, I guess, like 3 or 4 years ago. It was revealed.
Oh, okay. Because when I was watching it, that was still kind of like the big question. It was like, who's the person that's doing all of this street art? Because he was anonymous. So I had no clue that he was like well recognized. I know that people were like stealing his things and like
cutting them off of walls and stuff, kind of like they used to do with Basquiat back in the 80s. They would just like cut whole panels out of like the side of a New York City building if he had written on it. But Banksy now does like giant installations. He did one called Dismal Land that was like kind of bizarro version of Disneyland. I believe this was somewhere in England that he did this. So it was like an entire theme park that you could walk into, and it was just like these kind of demonic perversions of Disney logos and icons and stuff like that.
That's awesome. On all of these different creative things, it got me thinking, how have these different experiences, because you have so many of them, like I was also looking at the places that you've lived, like you've gone and done so many different things. You were offered a scholarship to play basketball or to play baseball at Trinity University.
Not quite basketball.
No, not
as
quite
a
basketball.
5'8" guy, I don't think that one's ever gonna happen, but
but you've had so many different experiences, and you've already mentioned kind of how some of them have helped you do other things, how the art has helped you, you know, or how business has helped you do art, all of these different elements. What do you think is been the most surprising, an experience that you didn't really expect that came back and just helped you out, or
God, I'm not sure. Ultimately, I guess like sports. My dad was like a very how do you want to put this, strict guy growing up, and it was like mandatory that you had to play all sports. I didn't intrinsically have interest in sports. I was much more, even as a young child, like inclined to just be like, leave me alone, let me draw my weird pictures and write my weird shit. But my dad made it mandatory. You have to play sports until you graduate high school or you get kicked out of the house, basically. So I played every sport, and I was pretty good at some of them, baseball being the best. And I think, there was some lesson taught in like a team sport climate that I think has stuck with me. I'm not sure exactly what it was. There's some kind of competitive element. Like even if you're an artist, again, like I was saying, part of I think the biggest challenge as an artist is like figuring out how to make a career of that. How do you get paid to do this? And there's inherently a competitive element in that, especially if you're trying to like sell a screenplay or something in Hollywood. Every studio, every streamer has a fixed development budget that they spend every year. So you are 100% competing with every other writer in this town to get a piece of that fixed budget every year. And so viewing it that way as kind of like a competition and how do I beat out other writers, I think has been helpful. It's definitely something, especially when you're going to like do a pitch, there are like certain kind of tactics you can use. It's like selling a car or something. And I think all of that came in one way or another from my dad forcing me to play sports.
Yeah, my dad was similar with soccer growing up for me. He was really he kind of had this idea when he was a kid. Actually, he was offered a scholarship to go play in Houston. He was really poor growing up, so he actually literally could not drive to the university to like go and participate and be there. But he kind of embedded that dream onto me, and he was like, "You're going to play soccer. You're going to do all these things." Do you have a similar situation with your kids' representative, or do you kind of just let them do their thing, and if they enjoy it, they enjoy it?
They do their thing, but we do. I think one of the things we did want them to get involved in things and try different things, right? So music is something that we kind of have asked them to kind of go and to do, and as well as playing sports. But, I have twin boys. They're 11 years old. One loves baseball. He wants to play on as many teams as he can and, loves to go to practice and wants to work at it. And the other one's just, fine just being happy on the team, which is okay. I'm not going to force him or do anything he doesn't want to do. But I think it is like, for some of the reasons you said, it's, it does teach, how to be a team member and how to work together and how to be, the thing, like, you're not always going to win, right, every time. And to kind of go into sometimes, victory is great. Sometimes you have to learn to take defeat, though, too. Mm-hmm. And I think sports kind of teaches you how to do that, right? And kind of really about giving your effort and giving your all towards what you do. But, I'm not going to, not going to be there cracking the whip behind them like, hey, you need to do this or you need to do that, or I'm going to set you up with, a coach every day to work on you. If, that's not his thing, he's not in it. The interesting thing is my son, who's not really into like sports, does kind of like the art stuff, right? He loves to kind of build with Legos. He, he likes to act, he likes to sing, so he does have more of that artistic kind of nature there, right? Which is fine too, right? If that's his passion, that's what we will support him in and what he wants to do. But I think at this young age, I think it is important for him to kind of play sports and things like that, and to do the music and to kind of have those creative outlets.
Yeah, that's one
to do things.
That's one thing I wish. When I was super young, my dad had me playing the violin as well. Mm-hmm. The recession happened, had to get out of it, but that was one of those things too, where it's just the multifaceted. Doing sports, doing school, doing the creative things that kind of get your brain working and thinking in different ways. It's just good for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, well. My next question here is about, again, going on this American, the average American. Right now, something that my generation is struggling with is this loneliness epidemic. Sure. And when I was looking at your book, and specifically some of the criticisms, a lot of these things, I would say, are getting worse. Then there was I feel like there was a period of progress in like 2014 to 2020 almost. Even though bad things were obviously still happening, I feel like people were more aware and trying to better themselves and be kinder. I feel like that kind of has gone out the window over the past couple of years, especially with a lot of the stuff that's going on online. Yeah. So my question is, Chad, why is my generation so lonely from your perspective?
I think it's probably, this is just my take. This is just kind of how I see things unfolding. And for what it's worth, my brain has always operated this way, in kind of identifying systems and seeing how they could be made more efficient or exploited to my own gains for whatever that may be worth. So the system that I kind of see at play with like contemporary human culture, American culture specifically, has to do a lot, obviously, with the internet and social media specifically. But I think like the internet as a tool, social media as a tool is nothing. It is inert. It's benign. It's how those tools are being used by the most powerful people in the world currently. Social media specifically is being used by these billionaires to essentially craft a reality that exists online through social media. Mark Zuckerberg has a very specific interest in promoting certain ideas on his platform, as does Elon Musk, as does anything Bezos touches. These guys are literally colluding to try and create an environment on the internet that fosters loneliness, hatred, anger, rage, fear, because those are the things that give them more money, basically. And so their real goal, I believe, is to take this version of reality they're creating online and somehow port it into the real world. So if they can get you mad enough online to hate your family, hate your parents, hate your friends, whatever, you're going to do that in real life as well. And you're not going to talk to them. You're going to isolate yourself, and you're going to give them more money through your attention on their social media platforms. I think that this is like effectively designed by the people who actually control the internet. And I don't think it's going to go away because it's obviously been incredibly profitable for them.
Yeah, and obviously they do it with politics, but another way that, and I think the way that it's been the most detrimental, and we've talked about it on the show, the first episode of the podcast was talking about how you're making fun of Charlie Kirk for saying that like podcasting is a masculine space because it takes you out into the wild of conversations and it's unscripted and this, that, and the other. So one of those angles that they have taken is the masculinity approach. Why do you think that that's been so successful with their strategy?
I think there was a lot that happened when Trump got elected the first time and it was kind of around the Me Too movement. There was a lot going on with like gender politics and social shifts happening in like even the media that was getting made, like in Hollywood. A lot of the stuff kind of moved more about like female ideologies, and it was just more kind of like aware of that, and that's what was being promoted in a lot of TV shows and movies. There was the whole movement that like comedy is dead and people were getting canceled and all this. And I'm not saying I have any feelings on that one way or another. That's just what was happening. And I think what it wound up doing is for people like Joe Rogan, who were leading kind of what they now call the Manosphere, there was this backlash that started happening that was like, well, when I was coming up, you could make misogynist jokes and everything was fine. And they kind of yearned to have that back. And I think as that ideology is kind of presented in opposition to what every young guy was seeing happening in Hollywood and everything else, it just kind of like took hold. And now you have like, you know, we're in a world where Joe Rogan is like a thought leader for men. Is that a world you want to live in? I don't know. Like, you can leave that up to, you know, whoever. We all have our own opinions of it or whatever. But I think that it was like all of this is somehow in opposition to the first Trump administration and kind of what happened, I think, at least socially, to like the mainstream media that was being created in America. And I think it's just, I mean, it's like the angry young man kind of thing. And I think to some degree, Average American Male was like a version of that before Trump or anything was around. But it's this idea of like making heroes out of like, you know, Patrick Bateman in American Psycho or De Niro's character in Taxi Driver, these guys who feel like society has turned against them. And so I'm going to rage against that society in whatever capacity it may be. And I think you get that kind of idea is like insulated by people like Rogan. I mean, Liver King is a good example of it. That's like, he so vehemently rejects any kind of modern version of society that he's literally on TikTok eating like raw livers and forcing his kids to cut apart an elk that they shot on his backyard property, you know. It's some wild shit, man. I don't know, but that's just kind of how I see it. I don't know what the true answer is, but we all know that like this is a thing that is happening, that young men are being more isolated and turning to these kind of online outlets that are telling them one thing or another.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting because it's the people that are the most successful that are always complaining about how they're not allowed to do things that they were used to be able to do. Like, you know, like Joe Rogan, you know, complaining about the jokes that or even I think the cancel thing is the perfect example with comedians, where comedians were going on tours about being canceled and their whole set was about being canceled, and they were like achieving success based off of the fact that they were canceled, and it was so counterintuitive, but yet so effective. How do you
there was like
that?
a lot where, you know, I love comics, right? I love to go to comedy shows, and that's something me and my wife do. But and to me, it's art, right? It is art, and sometimes it goes down a path or it's there, but it can be funny. And you know, sometimes I think we've stopped. You know, we can't laugh at ourselves anymore, right? Which I think is kind of bad. You used to be able to hear a joke and you could laugh, right? Even if it was about like people from your culture or about you or somehow described you. But now there's a tendency, I think, to get, you know, people get offended. And like they're just, you know, making you laugh, right? It's jokes. They're not really kind of taking it serious. But I think what there's really happened is a lot of comedians don't go to college campuses anymore, which that was kind of like where I was in college. That was like the first place where we really started the kind of thing. They would come and they would do shows, and usually the shows were free. I remember Margaret Cho coming to my college campus and doing a show, but now a lot of them just don't want to do that because anything, you know, they're afraid anything they may say, it's like people are going to rant against them, or they don't want to go down that path. So why bother, right? I'll go, you know, I'd rather go play the arena or go do something else to where I can go play the comedy clubs and kind of go and, like as you said, right, talk about how they can't go to college campuses anymore because, you know, people can't laugh at themselves anymore.
Cancellation it's interesting because I don't think it's an actual thing. You can do your comedy bit or make your art or do whatever you want to do. And then in quotes, if you get canceled, the perception is the internet turns against you and therefore you have to like hide forever. But cancellation really is you do something that the public doesn't like in an overwhelming majority, at least online, and then corporations decide we will not hire you anymore. So it's Netflix saying you're not going to be in our movies anymore, or major studios saying we can't cast you anymore. Some people have like skirted around that. You see with Shane Gillis, he got technically, in quotes, canceled when all of his racist tweets came out right after they hired him to be the newest cast member of Saturday Night Live. That all kind of blew over. Now he's got a show on Netflix. He's selling out arenas. So like, was he, in quotes, canceled? I don't really think so. It really boils down to like making money as any kind of artist, I think, in contemporary America or globally, is really just about like, can you generate an audience who likes your stuff? If there's an audience who hates you, it does not matter, because now there's the internet. You don't need Netflix. You don't need studios to put you in movies anymore. It's like you can just get money directly from your audience if you want to. So I don't know. It's weird. The whole cancellation thing, to me, I just have never like latched onto that. It's a strange mentality. Like, is Joe Rogan canceled? Spotify gave him $500 million. Like, I don't think so. You know what I mean?
Time for a quick message from our sponsors. This episode of Who Dem is brought to you by Elect Dems Now. We all know that podcasts are the future. They give us the chance to connect with our elected officials like never before. That's why Elect Dems Now is committed to helping voters engage with the people who represent us. Supporting organizations that bring us closer to our elected officials is crucial to advancing and advocating for the change we want to see. Whether it's $5 or $50, every donation to Elect Dems Now helps shape our future and ensures a country we can all be proud of. Your support sends a clear message to candidates and elected officials. Connecting with you means connecting with America. To contribute and make a difference, visit electdemsnow.org today. Your donation helps build a world where we are all connected. Paid for by Elect Dems Now, electdemsnow.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. Yeah, no, and I think that's also why a lot of these comedians have gone into the podcasting space, is because when you have your own podcast, you're able to kind of have a community that always, regardless of what you're doing, is going to defend you. And in particular with like when you're being canceled, I disagree with the definition of being canceled here. You said it was vast majority of the public. I just think it's a certain group online that is going against your community. It's that. Sometimes, it'll be one half of the internet versus the other half of the internet. Sometimes it's just swarms of community, like smaller communities just canceling each other. But at the end of the day, like you said, time and time again, the trend that I've noticed is that people that get canceled, when they come back, when they do their relaunch, they're larger than they were before. A good example, one that we always use here because he did it through a podcast, was Logan Paul, where he does this huge thing in the suicide forest. He films a dead body and he uploads it onto the internet to his largely, an audience of largely young kids. And he takes a break from the internet, whatever, comes back a couple months later and launches a podcast. And what that gives him the chance to do is just present like this authentic, unscripted version of himself that instantly rehabilitated his image. It was almost like it passed over overnight. Everyone forgot about it.
And now he's employed by one of the biggest entertainment corporations the world has ever seen, with the WWE. So, yeah, I mean, he was able to kind of skirt around it. And that ultimately is like I was saying, it's cancellation really is about the giant corporate greed machine saying, you're a little bit of a liability right now. We don't want the bad tweets and the bad Instagram comments about our show, so we're not going to do that. I remember like when the stuff was breaking about Chris D'Elia. He was in a Zack Snyder movie called Zombie World or so. I don't remember what it was called, but it was about to come out on Netflix. He was literally in the movie. They had shot it and it was done. They took him out of the movie. They replaced all of his scenes with Tig Notaro and digitally removed him from some scenes and stuff. And I was like, now that is like as close as it gets to cancellation. This giant corporate entity literally just was like, we need to replace this man from these shots, which I found pretty interesting.
Yeah, but then you do the Russell Brand thing and you like you convert and then you start doing your own show and you somehow manage to get an audience that just is able to look past all of your flaws and forgive you and buy your merch and whatnot.
There's a little bit of like an adversarial kind of thing just implicit in people who have been, in quotes, canceled, that it's like canceled versus woke or something like that is kind of like baked into the internet. So if you are a guy who gets canceled, you just have to like go to the dark side, and there's an audience for you there, you know. And
Yeah.
I think that's what you see with Russell Brand. That's what you see with a lot of these dudes. They're like,
Yeah.
well, I guess I remember like when Louis C.K. tried to come back, and I guess did successfully. He made millions of dollars off of a stand-up thing that he put on his own website. But it was like he got labeled an alt-right comedian there for a second. And it's like, is he? I don't know. Make your own determination on that. But he did kind of embrace it in order to like make some money off of it, you know? There's an audience everywhere is basically what you learn from it, I think.
I do kind of agree with you, right? I think when it comes to canceled, it is the corporations that are going to be the ones that really decide whether you're coming back or not, right? And if they think they can make money off of you, you're going to be back.
Yeah,
right?
Dave Chappelle,
right?
Case in point, he had his last stand-up special had that. There was a bunch of transphobic stuff in it, but Netflix was like, "We're not taking it down because we believe in artistic integrity." And it's like, but he's the #1 most watched thing on your platform.
Yeah.
That's what you believe in is getting eyeballs, like forcing people to watch this.
Right. But Kevin Spacey not coming back.
He tries though. He throws out a YouTube video every Christmas as the character from House of Cards. That shit fascinates me. That dude is just on one.
Yeah, I don't think he's coming back. So.
No, he just directed a movie that's coming out this year, I think, with shit. There's other there are actors in it. There's like some people in it, I think. I could be wrong, but I'm almost positive this is right. He's trying.
That's the thing. Like when you get canceled, it's not like someone comes in and you lose everything. It's like you have to hide for a little bit and you have to wait and test the waters. I think Kevin Spacey might have to hide for a little bit longer than a little bit. But eventually, if the water's right, like if things keep heading in the direction that they're heading, I wouldn't even be surprised if that was the case, that he was able to make a comeback. But on this note of podcasts and their ability to kind of mend things and fix things, you do a podcast now that is the reason that we're having you on, The Necessary Conversation. It's how we found you. Talk to me a little bit about it. Talk to me about what inspired it. And for those in our audience that don't know, give us a rundown.
God, where to even begin with this? My parents I have a sister and we have 2 parents. My sister is also an adult. She's in her mid-40s. I'm in my late 40s. She has 3 kids. I have 0. My parents, sometime during Obama's second administration, became insanely radicalized. It went from like watching Fox News 24 hours a day on 2 TVs that were 1 second out of sync in the bedroom and the kitchen, so that it was like a literal echo chamber in their home. It went from that to like Fox News is not right-wing enough. They now only watch Newsmax 24 hours a day. There is racism baked into this, obviously. There's just all kinds of all the isms. My parents have them all. And for a minute there, like multiple years, my sister and I basically didn't talk to them, nor did they talk to us. And as they started getting older, I was kind of like, shit, are we really never going to talk to our parents again because of Donald Trump? It just seemed absurd to me. But my parents are like deep in that hole. They buy everything he makes. They've got his shoes, his cologne, his Bible, like all of it.
They got the gold shoes, the gold sneakers there, huh?
Yes,
Wow.
My dad has the gold shoes.
So Fox News was wrong with the target demographic of those gold shoes.
Yeah, exactly. It's a 73-year-old white guy has Donald Trump's gold shoes and wears his cologne every day. But I basically, I had done a few other podcasts prior to that, one of which I'm still doing. It's called Game of Roses, where we break down The Bachelor and like dating style reality shows like sports with math metrics and all this kind of stuff. And I've been like secretly training players to infiltrate that system for the past 4 years, which has been pretty fun. But I was just sitting around and I was like, I don't want my parents to die, and my sister and I have no relationship with them as that, starts to happen. Health starts declining and they need our help, but we're not even talking to them, that kind of shit. And I was just ultimately made a decision, like, I'm not going to let Donald Trump and the kind of people who control this media apparatus steal my family. And I realized it was like on me to do that. My parents were never going to come to the table. I would have to be the one, or my sister would have to be the one to reach out and say, like, we need to talk. Let's just talk every week. And again, because I had been doing these podcasts and I really found podcasting to be like an art form that I like a lot, and I think I have some skill at and certainly know how to monetize, I was like, can I convince my parents to do a podcast with me where we talk about politics for an hour a week? And, my mom is she's always kind of wanted to be famous. Honestly, I knew that's how I would appeal to her. My dad then would not like my mom to have a spotlight if he didn't also have one. I knew that's how I would appeal to him. And my sister was, she's a good sport and funny, and she was down to do it. So we started doing it about 2.5 years ago. I thought like it would be good to build an audience leading into the 2024 election. And so I started by having one episode where it was just me and my mom for an hour talking about how she grew up, what her political leanings were as a child, how they had changed to Trump. Then I did one with my dad, one with my sister, and every episode since then has been all four of us talking about kind of the biggest political issues of that week.
Yeah, no, it's a really I got into it now. It's a really interesting show. I have a lot of conservative friends back home. And
where are you from, if I may ask?
I'm from Forsyth County, Georgia.
Okay.
So a little bit north of Atlanta, but still very, very south. And it's difficult because going back almost to the cancel culture thing, I think something that ends up happening is that when you push these people away, they get deeper and deeper into the echo chamber that they're already in.
100%.
And you end up isolating them, and almost to the point where they are almost a victim because they are isolated so much to such a degree that it's easy for them to blame you and be like, well, you're the one that, pushed me away because of this, that, and the other. And I've always been trying to navigate, like, how do you maintain that balance of, obviously, I think one thing that is very differently from how you think. But at the end of the day, I still love you, and like I appreciate who you are as a person beyond that. And I want you to be, a part of my life. How do you navigate that on the show and outside of it?
Well, I mean, on this most recent episode, actually, my mom brought up some memory she had of me and my dad just like screaming at each other in the living room over something during one of Obama's terms. And, she used that as kind of a moment for her to crystallize the idea that we were on these polarized sides of this political landscape in America, and that hasn't really changed. But for me, it's like, I'll tell you what, like, the podcast does very well for our family, whether you find it entertaining or whatever. For us, for the four people on that podcast, it gives us a place to talk about politics exclusively for an hour a week. So now when we go back for birthdays or Christmas or whatever, we don't talk about politics. That shit all lives in the podcast.
Right.
And I think it has and I didn't anticipate this, but it has sucked that version of ourselves, that kind of piece of our identities. It puts it in the podcast box, and it doesn't really ever come out. So when we're just together in real life, it's much more cordial than it's ever been. People are not screaming at each other like my dad did in that memory my mom had, and I think allowing, not that my dad is civil by any stretch of the imagination, but trying to have a civil conversation with somebody who's on the other side of it, especially your family, I think it, and forcing them to do it for an hour a week, this kind of regimented thing, it's almost like therapy. Not that any of us are therapists, and I don't know if it's actually doing any good in terms of what therapy might be used for, but it does help our family specifically. And I get DMs all the time from people that are like, my mom and dad are just like this, or I have somebody in my life that's, down the Trump rabbit hole and all this shit. And your podcast really shows a way that you can kind of just be there and listen to them. And there's something about just being present with them that I think at least my mom appreciates. But certainly, prior to this, I would get a text message from my dad once a year on my birthday. Happy birthday. Now we literally talk for an hour every week about shit that maybe gets him a little flustered and he yells at me and calls me names. But we're talking. I think that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. And you can actually make it through Thanksgiving dinner without having to worry about a family fight or anything, right?
Exactly. Me and my dad recently it was me, my dad, my brother-in-law, and my nephew my whole family went to Kansas State except me. I'm the black sheep in that regard. But we went to a Kansas State football game, and I was like, how is this going to be? Because my parents live in Oklahoma City, fly into Oklahoma City. It's like a 5-hour drive to Manhattan to go to see this thing. I'm just like, shit, I'm going to be locked in a car for 5 hours with my dad one way and then 5 hours back. This is going to be wild. But it was fine. He didn't bring up politics once. And I think it's because of the podcast.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing left to talk about because you talked about it on the last week's show.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I think Trump supporters, at least at the level that my parents are, again, buying all the merch, wearing the shit, it's like lifestyle Trump. there is something baked into it, and it comes from Trump himself, from his ideology, that is this need to kind of like prove your position in a perceived adversarial relationship with anybody who is not on your side. And so for a long time, my sister and I would come home, and that need had to be served immediately. It was like, did you see what Trump said? Nah, 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 nah. This is impersonation of my dad, sorry. And then he would just like lay into us, be like, oh, good to see you. And then we would just sit there in silence as he screamed about whatever was happening. Because those hardcore Trump supporters need to like validate their stance and what they perceive to be the correctness of their ideology. And if you just give them a spot to do that once a week, you don't have to deal with it in real life.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's also kind of what I've noticed with my friends back home. It's when I first get there, they'll do that. They'll be like, all right, like, chat some politics. And then for the rest of the time that I'm back home, they're all right. They got it out of their system. It's good now. I'm curious, Representative, though, because I hadn't even ever thought of this. Who yells at you during Thanksgiving? Like, have you had these does this happen? Because I can imagine, we have political discussions when I go back home for Thanksgiving, blah, 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 whatever. And every family has that joke where it's like, oh, you're a crazy uncle at Thanksgiving. Yeah. Do you have situations like that? And how is it different, like, being in politics?
My family's my immediate family, right, is very, I would say, I don't want to say liberal, but moderate to liberal, depending on some more than others, right? But there is no, amongst my siblings, my parents, my in-laws, everybody who kind of shows up to, we usually Thanksgiving, me and my family, we go and we do something. Like me, Jackie, my wife, and the boys will go and like either serve dinner or do something to kind of help out. And then we have on Friday, we have what we call family dinner with, our immediate family and stuff come over. But yeah, my friends and family, or my family, I should say, are more on the other side, right? They're anti-Trump.
Yeah.
So I get yelled at by like my mother or my mother-in-law by like, what's he doing? Why haven't you stopped? Why haven't you stopped him? Stop this. Can he do that? Can he do that? Yeah. I get texts from my mother-in-law actually. It's like, it's some executive order that comes out, like crazy thing that he says he's going to do, and it's like, can he do that? And that's what I get like at our dinners and stuff. It's like, my mom's like, oh God, he's so stupid. He's so stupid.
No, I can imagine, because my mom texts me and she's like, can you ask the representative if Trump can do this or that? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to ask him that on the show. So I can't imagine having the family
my mother's probably already asked me, right? But I'm like, so it happens all the time.
Yeah, no, and I don't have any answers. I'm just doing the podcast here. Like, I have no input, no insight. It's I'm imagining very different. I imagine they also have suggestions for how you can approach things. That's something that I get, from a lot of my family, especially with doing the podcast, because they can go and watch and they'll be like, why don't you do this? Or why don't you say this? Or act this way, this way. Yeah. Do they also do that? Or is it more just like larger ideas?
Nobody's really given me any suggestions of like, oh, you should go do this or you should do that. I won't say that comes more from my constituents.
Gotcha.
I think than it does from my family. But my mother's never told me I should go and do this or I should need to go do that.
Yeah, that's nice, because when I started podcasting, my mom was like, I thought we sent you to Washington, D.C. to go be like a hill turn or working hard. I was like, no, like, I swear, give me some time. It'll work out. She had all the suggestions at that point in time. But, now we're here. We're having this conversation. I wanted to ask you, Chad, we have this segment I'm introducing for this episode called Chad or Dad.
Okay.
I'm going to give you some quotes. Representative, I want you to tell me whether these quotes are from Chad or Dad. Chad, you confirm who said these. The first quote is pretty straightforward. I have the ability to do whatever I want to. Representative, who said it, Chad or Dad?
I'm going to say Chad.
Chad, who said it, Chad or Dad?
My dad said that. He said, I can do whatever I want to because I live in America.
You remember the full quote.
I sadly have kind of a photographic memory for media.
Okay, well then you're gonna love the rest of these. The next quote is, "You're trying to open my mouth and cram a bunch of horse shit down my throat. I'm not gonna take it." Chad or Dad?
That's got to be Dad.
That is Dad.
That's Dad.
That's pretty straightforward. This one I think is my favorite on the list. You can ban assault weapons until your fucking dick falls off, and it ain't gonna change shit, Chad or Dad.
I don't know. That's I don't know. Let's say Dad again.
That Chad?
That is my dad. Although I could have said that too, I think.
Yeah.
I kind of believe that. Honestly, I think mass shootings are like, they go beyond just assault weapons. The problem of it, you know, there's something like in the culture that that makes people want to do it, which needs to be figured out.
Let's go back to that.
Yeah.
2 more quotes.
Sure.
I was wrong when I thought Trump would do 45 and 47. He's also going to do 48.
That sounds like Dad.
I think that was my dad, but that also could have been me because I believe he will at least attempt that.
Yeah.
That was Dad.
Yeah.
That was Dad. But I picked that one because I did feel like that is something that like someone that's more on the progressive side would be like, yeah, I thought it was going to be 45 and 47, but he might do 48 at this rate.
Yeah, sure.
That's the worry. That is the worry.
The final one, and this I think it's my second favorite, but I think just takes the star for creativity here. They should hook his balls up to a car battery. Dad or Dad?
You know, they've all been Dad, so I'm just going to go with Dad.
There you go. Good guess.
That's 100% dad. And he was saying that about, God, I forget who it was. It James Comey or something?
It was actually Kilmar Obrego Garcia.
Oh,
that I think he was
Jesus
saying it
Christ.
about. Yeah, it was
rough.
it was definitely a rough quote.
Producer chime in here. I think it was actually Mahmoud Khalil.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Okay.
It was Mahmoud
Yeah, makes
Khalil
sense.
from the producer, fact checking. Thank you, Max.
Hey, Dad's very colorful with putting the words together there.
I mean, he's like, he grew up in Kansas, but he's lived most of his life in Texas. So, you know, Texans are known for turning colorful phrases. And my dad certainly does that.
Yeah, I want to throw an asterisk here in because it's so awkward you know, like when you're growing up, especially in a Hispanic household, your parents are like, people in suits, representatives, don't cuss in front of them. It is so hard for me to say all of these profane things with both of you here and just having to get through the questions. So I'm gonna make you say the next profane thing here, Dad.
Okay, sure.
What is the worst thing that your dad has ever said to you?
In my life?
Well, I wouldn't
shit.
go to number one. I'd say the one that you're the most comfortable sharing on the podcast. Yeah.
God, I don't know. I mean, every racial slur you can imagine has been said hundreds of times throughout my life. On the podcast, he's done some things where he like storms off. He'll get pissed because he views us as like trying to do gotcha journalism and trap him in logic traps and all this shit. And I'm just asking like, well, wait a minute though. If you think this, how could you think this? If you listen to the show, if you watch the show, you know he's like a highly aggressive dude. I think the older he gets, the worse it gets because he feels the control of what he perceives to be the world as it should be slipping through his fingers with age. All generations go through this as death approaches. And I think he's just not handling it very well. He's a guy who doesn't really look at like his own emotions, why he feels them, what are the causes of them, how he might be able to change them if they're unpleasant. He's just not a very self-reflective person, I think. Or if he is, it's buried so deep down in him that all that comes out is the kind of anger and the disappointment in what the world has become.
Yeah. I have a similar situation with some of my family members as they get older. I think it is that situation, and I've said this too, where like conservatism, for me, I think it's an ideology that's rooted in fear, and particularly in the fear that the things that you grew up with are no longer the things that are in the world around you. And it's this idea that you want to keep reverting back to like, okay, well, this is how it was when I was growing up and things are like this now, so things must be going terribly, when in reality it's just a changing world. Your parents went through the same thing, their parents went through the same thing. So I think it's accelerated now because things are changing so much faster, and I can't imagine being your parents' age going through the past like 20 years and
Past 20 years. I think about this constantly with my parents. My dad was around essentially for the birth of television. Like the first iterations of it in the 50s, the real first iterations of it, when you had like the first networks, Ed Sullivan is having the Beatles on, shit like this. My dad saw all of that. He saw Kennedy get assassinated. He's been through these insane moments of political and social upheaval, as well as technological progress, that now, I mean, as a kid, again, being shown the birth of modern television in America, to now, we're like having a Zoom or a Riverside conference on a podcast talking about politics and social media and all this shit. It's like that generation, the baby boomers generation, I think is like, it was just positioned completely incorrectly to be able to handle what is happening technologically and socially in the world currently. You know, imagine growing up in the 50s and then seeing like transgender women competing in sports and all of this. And my parents hate all that shit. It's like they have no capacity to even try to understand it. And they're getting tricked actively and purposefully by people who run these social media companies because it means money, you know? It's like, I don't think they ever had a chance. That said, do they have some like some innate ideas and stuff? For sure, that are not good. But yeah, it's wild. It's wild to think of like what technologically has happened in the span of the 73 years that my dad has been alive, especially how it affects the kind of social arenas in America and globally.
Well, I think if you think somebody like your dad's age and older, right, it's like 80 or older than that. I mean, especially if they grew up in the South, you know, segregation was still 100%. Very much a part of society.
Yeah.
The whole idea of transgender was like, you know, they were like, what the hell was that? Like, it just wasn't something that people thought of or there, right? But, you know, so much has changed socially for those individuals. It's like, oh my God, it's like, it's happening again, you know, for some of those people, right? Of how much of their world, you know, especially if they kind of grew up and maybe even kind of believed in that and kind of saw it and kind of, you know, were raised with it, right? It's so much of their world has changed in their lifetime. You know, it does kind of make you wonder, like, wow, it's like, no wonder why they kind of, you know, blow up like that and kind of think like it's, you know, we're headed towards, you know, Armageddon.
Yeah, that everything's crazy, everything's wrong. It's all different than how they grew up. No, I think one of the first interviews that I did was actually with president of one of the HBCUs here in Washington, D.C. And, you know, on the podcast, he was talking about how he was one of the first students to participate in desegregation. Like, he was one of the first kids to be in his high school that was black. I think he was the first one. And it's just wild to think about that we're walking among people that have had so many different experiences, even to that extent. Like, that is again, we have all these conversations now that, like, you know, oh, there's no more slavery or there's no more racism, you know, because of this, that, and the other. There's been all this progress, but still there's people that experience that, and that those experiences shaped who they are today and what they're doing right now.
And you know, for a lot of it hasn't changed, right? Schools are more segregated today, you know, than they were like back in the 60s and 70s. You know, it is very, you know, we think, right, we've made progress, but, you know, in ways we've kind of taken steps back too on other things.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I think the good thing about the necessary conversation is that for us to make progress, I think the first step is having necessary conversations like the one that you're having with your family and kind of healing this ridge that has been created in our nation. Because again, going back, especially with social media, they're just echo chambers, right? You know, my mom, again, she was sending me some posts, and she was just like, well, I don't get how like conservatives can see these and still agree with what Donald Trump is saying. And I was like, well, that's the thing. They're not seeing them. You know, you live in your reality and they live in their reality, and everyone thinks that they're right because no one comes together to have these conversations and hash them out the way that you do on this podcast.
Yeah, but that's by design, because Mark Zuckerberg knows if he's feeding the right-wing stuff to all the right-wing people, they're just going to keep looking at it. And that's all he cares about. It's a product. Like, essentially at this point, political ideology is a product that is bought and sold by the richest people in the world. And so whatever ideology you plug into has been designed by somebody. This is right and left. And they are using it to make money off of your eyes, off of your attention, you know? And I try to explain this to my parents, to be like, you can't, anything you see in any news media outlet has been spun to keep you reading or watching or whatever. That's its only goal. It is a product. And maybe the facts of that story, like what are the exact dollar amounts of Trump's tariff and what countries is he putting them on? That may be uniformly correct across all versions of a story, but what is put around that, is this good, is it bad, is it going to destroy your business, is it going to help us all be richer in a year? That kind of stuff is what they're really selling.
Yeah, no, to me it really scares me, especially watching again, going back to the technology advancing and my parents getting older. Like right now I feel like especially with how AI is, they're at like a place where they can see a video and they're like, yeah, that's AI, like that's not real. But it's starting to get so good.
Yeah, that'll be gone within a year. Another podcast I did was called Dudesy, and the premise was an AI told me and my friend Will Sasso to come into the studio every week, and it would tell us what to talk about, and it would make little videos and songs and stuff. But that was just like a fictional premise. I was the one writing the whole show, et cetera, et cetera. And I made at one point a thing that our AI, Dudesy, made a new hour-long stand-up set of George Carlin. And so I wrote this whole thing. I used AI to make the voice, and I made a little video that went along with it as well. Put that on the internet. It immediately was getting hundreds of thousands of views, and George Carlin's daughter sued us, along with a very big copyright attorney's office. And immediately I was just like, oh, these people don't even understand, like, what they think has happened is not even possible to be made with AI yet. And it just showed me like an immediate lack of understanding of what AI technology can really do, what it's capable of, at least at the time, what its limitations were. And it was like, if a giant copyright attorney's office is suing us and they're doing no research, clearly, they did not look into this at all, because immediately I was like, it's fictional. I wrote the whole thing, and that was it. That was the end of it, But it really illustrated for me that, like, if they don't know what's going on, if they're willing to like file a lawsuit in California court, like, my parents ain't got no shot. There's no way. I think that generation, even my generation, I'm Gen X. Like, I remember a time before the internet existed, my childhood, basically, and we're the last generation to have that memory. I think that no one's going to be able to discern whether something is AI or not within probably a year. Google VO3 just came out 2 weeks ago. That right now is kind of like the top of the line text to video generator. And it's very good. And it's only getting better. We're still in like year 3 of consumer grade AI technology. Year 3. What's it going to be like 20 years from now?
There's a political candidate who's running for a congressional race right now who her husband actually did it, but put together a kind of like a digital ad. And you wouldn't even know that the people are fake unless they're the AI generated people are telling you that, hey, we're AI.
Yeah.
And but you look at them and they look.
Oh, I know.
completely
Yeah,
real.
I know what ad you're talking about. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was great. Where it was like someone was kidnapped and they were like, "Mom, this isn't real. Like, it's AI."
No, that's
No.
just like they were talking about their political opponent, and they're like, and they were just kind of talking about how, like, I'm AI generated and I'm not real. Kind of like the ideas of like, so and so.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see. That's very creative.
Yeah.
That's a very creative. That's going to be interesting too. How do you think that politics is going to change with AI, or how has it already changed? Are there like staffers using this stuff like to?
I don't know. I don't think well, maybe we are. I don't know.
You are. If you're using a computer or a cell phone, you're using AI at this
Taylor,
point.
who's sitting in here, who's part of my staff, started shaking her head yes as I was about to say no. So I'm like, are we?
AI generated photo of herself literally yesterday.
Who did that?
Nancy Mace.
Wow.
Nancy Mace.
I've seen a lot of members on
It's not like there's this idea with AI that it's the technology itself is evil or bad, just like social media or the internet. It's not. The technology is inert. It's who is using it and for what purposes that can make it evil or bad or whatever. If you look at like Palantir, for example, I'm sure you're well versed in what they're doing.
Yeah.
It ain't good, and it's all AI, and they're using it to essentially, I think, make a database of every human being on the planet so that they can leverage that information into determining what this person gets to see, what this person gets to see, how can we control these people by controlling what information they have access to, et cetera, et cetera. And that's coming within the next 5 years. It's already happening now. I think, what Elon Musk did at Doge is basically give Peter Thiel every amount of data that he could need to put that system into place. All that said, AI can be used for some very good stuff too. There are all kinds of medical advancements that are happening now as a result of these AIs being able to penetrate large data sets and really get from them like what matters. Are there new drugs we can make? Are there better diagnoses for certain types of cancers, et cetera, et cetera? So it's like, I don't personally think AI is like bad. I think it honestly is going to be a technology that revolutionizes humanity. Once we get out of this little road bump phase we're in now where everybody hates it and evil people are using it to maybe control the world.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It is exactly right. You get out of it, I think, what you put into it, right? And
Yeah.
if you're going to use it for the right things, it's going to be a wonderful tool. But if you're creating it in order to do something evil or bad for you, then it's going to do that as well, right? But
Yeah.
we got to get away from that and somehow work it to like use it for good.
Yeah. No,
I agree.
I am concerned that it's going to be like the 1984 that we have the book up here, but like where, especially with AI and with what's going on with Planeteer, it's just like every single thing about an individual being able to be tracked by a big data set is absolutely terrifying. We were talking about being canceled. At this point, you can be canceled before you even have an opportunity to do anything. If you're trying to work at one of these top law firms that is now capitulating to the Trump administration, 5 years from now, and this large data set reveals that you were here and here, and this top law firm no longer wants to have you as a part of their staff, like that's terrifying. But the one thing, again, I said this on one of the other episodes too, that's super interesting about this administration is that they literally do the 1984 thing where they say what they're doing by saying that they're not doing it. We're the most transparent administration in the history.
Yeah.
They also do the 2-minute hate, which is extremely effective. In that book, and you're talking about George Orwell's 1984, the workers they forced them to do this thing called the 2-minute hate, where they would all file into a room and they would show a picture of the enemy on a big screen and they would all scream at the screen. That kind of like outrage loop that keeps you like, I hate these people, therefore I will do whatever it takes to beat them. That is the entire Republican game plan at this point, is to get essentially the proletariat of the Republican Party to just be focused on who they hate, so that they don't see the AI technology taking all their data. They don't see the policy shifts getting made that are against the interests of those very people. It's very Orwellian what we're living through now, and only getting worse really because of, in my opinion, corporate money. I think it has destroyed the American political system. I don't know if we come back from it. I don't know what the ultimate outcome is. It seems like a very bleak kind of dystopian technocracy. I think that is winning right now. And we'll see. We'll see with these midterm elections. We'll see if they, in quotes, actually happen or not.
Yeah, no, it is terrifying. And again, even with the way that like they're able to change information now, especially with people that believe them. The one thing that I've seen with your dad that's super interesting is like you'll tell him something that is like objectively true that did happen, and if Trump said the opposite, he's like, no, Trump said that it didn't happen. It's like that did not happen.
Yeah, it's wild.
And especially like, again, I don't know if it's going to be AI. I don't know what it will be, but especially if they're able to go in and, go to the New York Times and tell them, hey, that article that you wrote back in 1976, change the headline. We don't want it to be what it used to be.
Will likely what the big like industries that are selling media, especially media that is contrary to Trump's ideologies or designs, or maybe not even Trump, but the people who are like pulling those strings for real, Peter Thiel mainly. I think that what they are likely to start doing, because they own, again, all the companies that provide the media, is they're just going to start demonetizing anybody who says anything to the opposite. And that'll be it. Like if you take somebody like David Pakman, for example, or any of these left-wing YouTubers who have millions of followers, if Google suddenly says, well, we're just not going to pay you as much, do they keep doing that? Probably not. And that's all they have to do. There's nothing to govern that. There's no, you could file a lawsuit against them and then good luck trying to explain like, well, Google demonetized my thing because, it's like, that's never going to happen. I feel like the legal system, to a large degree, the political system doesn't understand how any of this technology works, specifically how it could be monetized or not. And the people who are in control of all of it can just turn that switch whenever they want. And that voice literally goes away.
Yeah. I think that while that might be, devastating for larger content creators, the one thing about being a larger content creator is that you do have systems of, you know, grassroots support, whether that be Patreon or all of these other things. But I think especially for smaller content creators, if they can, you know, snip them while they're, you know, still coming up, and they can't monetize and they don't have enough of an audience that's actually, you know, paying them.
I think it's going to come down to, like we talked about earlier, right? If these companies think they can make money off of some of the more progressive, liberal type, you know, podcasters, social media types, then they'll be able to thrive, right? But I think if they start snipping them in the bud before they can actually get there, then I think there's actually some problems. But I will say too, like on so many other different levels, not just AI or in social media, right? This administration is really trying to go in there, like you were saying, and change history or not let the details and the stories come out. And you're seeing what's going on. I mean, they're doing it on all the levels, right? They're trying to change things that are at the Smithsonian to kind of not tell the full story of the American history and try and like soften it up. Yeah. And it's a dangerous, you know, path that we're going down here with them to kind of go and to really try and, you know, get into 1984 again, right? Change our history from what it really was.
Yeah.
I recently was doing a talk at DePaul about The Bachelor of all things. But at the end of this, at that night, we went out with the two professors who put on this event and their two TAs who were both 20 years old. And invariably the conversation turned to politics. And these two 20-year-old girls were basically saying like they don't perceive anything happening in the American political sphere currently to be out of the ordinary. They grew up with Trump when they were in junior high, and they just feel like this is how things work. Right. And all of us who were like Gen X were like, oh shit, there's a whole generation of Americans growing up that think like this is just how it is, not realizing like what Trump is doing is drastically different than we have ever seen, at least in the, I mean, Jesus, really ever in American politics, let alone in like the televised era, in the technological era of American politics. And that to me was like the scariest moment basically of anything that has happened in this is like, there's the incoming generation, the incoming voting bloc just sees Trump as like, that's what a Republican is. That to me is like, I don't know how we come back from that.
Yeah. No, I think you just said kind of, I remember going to a high school graduation, God, maybe like around 2010, 2012, somewhere around there. And just realizing that these students had actually all grown up after the Cold War, where they became of age and knew really nothing of it. About the Soviet Union or how that all, you know, that whole period in time. And yeah, I think you're right there. We're at a time now where it is, you know, to them, the ideal of what a Republican is, you know, Trump, right? And, you know, they're probably thinking like, well, who are these rhinos he's like talking about, right?
Yeah.
You
there
know,
just isn't like, at least the first time Trump got elected, there seemed to be an urgency of like, we have to stop this. I remember me personally, I was up every night watching MSNBC till like 3 a.m, just being like, are they going to find the thing? When are they going to find the thing and get him out of here? This can't happen. This can't happen. And then it did happen for 4 years. It just happened. And like, he lost the election and, you know, didn't go peacefully, but he went. I just don't feel like, and that's part of like normal American politics now too, for an entire generation, is like a violent insurrection where a mob of people tried to take over the Capitol building. They're just like, yeah, whatever. That's just how politics go. Yeah. And because that is now baked into an entire generation, I just don't see like a way back from that, from saying like, this is abnormal. What this guy is doing is trying to essentially take control of a democracy and turn it into an authoritarian dictatorship. I just don't think people care anymore. A whole generation sees it as like regular.
Yeah, well, you know, I'll speak from the perspective of that generation because I, you know, am the 20-year-old here at the table that did grow up with this. It was really interesting to me because I hadn't thought about it until this conversation. But in middle school, you know, I thought it was maybe more because of the time period that you know, I'm in middle school now. Now people talk about politics a little bit more, but in middle school is when Trump really announced his run, and it was really interesting to see all of my peers immediately start, you know, what I recognize now as imitating their parents' talking points, coming into school and talking about, Trump did this, Trump did that, having these conversations about the Access Hollywood tape, whether, it was just locker room talk or whether it was this, that, or the other. I would agree that some people in my generation are like, okay, well, that's just what politics is, and that's what politicians do. And it's been hyperbolized, I think, because there always has been this idea of, maybe the system not working the best way or this, that, the other. But Trump really took that to the nth degree. And I think that my generation is split in the middle, where a lot of us see the system as not working for our futures, and as a consequence we should alter the system and change it and move it. And then some of us subscribe to the idea that, like, our system doesn't work, so let's get rid of it. Let's upthrow the whole thing. Let's go with Donald Trump. Let's go ahead, turn the whole thing upside down. But the one thing I will agree with is the fact that a lot of us think that this is what politics is. And I was a lot younger when I got involved. I remember my first political experience was when Obama was running, actually. And I was watching the TV with my parents, and, I was like, what is this race that they keep talking about? Like, where are they racing? Where are they going? Where's the finish line? Like, they keep talking about Washington, D.C. Like, who's going to make it first? Are they in a car? Are they just walking? Like, what is this race? And they explained it to me. And again, you had the Mitt Romney. I remember the 2012 election, how it was still cordial.
The binders full of women was the biggest thing from that election cycle. And now looking back on that, I'm like, Jesus, can we please just have some binders full of women? If that could be our worst thing we're worried about with the Republican candidate?
Yeah, no, and I do this series now on TikTok that I've started doing recently called Let's Talk About Yesterday. And it's so interesting because the news stories that I get to talk about every single day are more insane than any news story from any election cycle before 2016. And I think that is so harmful that we don't expect our politicians and the people that represent us to be like cordial anymore. We expect them to act like Marjorie Taylor Greene or to act out of pocket. One that I complain about a lot, and he's a Democrat, is John Fetterman too. Like, I think that there should be a certain level of professionalism and a certain level of decorum that is brought to politics that has just kind of been thrown out the window, and social media plays a part in it. But my generation is just used to the sensationalization of all of this shit, and I think it's going to be to the detriment of how politics is done in this country.
Yeah, a lot right now we can say it's like social media kind of driven, right? But I mean, some people even tell you the decline maybe started back in the 80s when they started C-SPAN came about, right? And now you had politicians, Newt Gingrich being one, making speeches, acting like he was talking like a room full of people and pointing his finger at them, you, and you, when really he's talking to an empty room, right? And now we got the sound bites, during the committee hearings that everybody, it's not really about getting information or answering anything. It's like, what kind of sound bite can I get out of this situation that I can put on my social media later on there? And it's kind of progressed over time, right? As to where we are kind of like right now.
Yeah. And I feel like it must be difficult too I'm going to use you as an example, because I imagine when you got into politics, you had this idea of it being a place of like decorum and people acting, not having to do these things and having to adapt to that.
Right.
How have you and your colleague, I'm sure some are for it, some are against it.
I would say like even, people kind of want you to act like in a way sometimes, right? That is not professional and there is no decorum. And it's like, what are you doing? Why aren't you out there? Like, why aren't you storming the building, kind of going to stop this, what's going on, what he's doing, right? And yeah, it is kind of but that has kind of become I think for a lot of people, the expectation of what's expected.
Yeah. And I think it's transcended my generation too. I think like even, older generations, people in their 30s, people in their 40s are kind of expecting this from their politicians now. It's happened quickly over the past couple of years, but they want the sound bites. They want, the crazy tweets. I mean, like the things I see representatives tweeting is just ridiculous. This is an actual tweet 2 days ago from a representative that said Islam is not compatible with Western civilization.
Yes.
It's like, that is insane. I agree. That is like that, like I was looking at it and I was like, oh, this is like one of those weird and wokeness now like Twitter pages, and I check it and they're like verified. It's like representative something, and I'm like, oh my god, it's like not Islamophobic isn't even the word for it. Like this is just terrible. This is just hate.
It's just I think those things are done to get the headlines. I think especially in the Republican Party, but I mean whatever. Everybody's vying for attention constantly. So if you say the crazy tweet, that means you're going to get to go on whatever cable news channel you want to back up the tweet or to apologize for it or whatever. It'll get you more screen time. I personally think this all goes back to the 60s when Gore Vidal and William Buckley Jr. did their debates for the Nixon presidency. That was kind of like on ABC. I don't know if you know Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley. Gore Vidal was a writer back in the 60s and all through the 70s, a little bit in the 80s, a very left-leaning, progressive, super genius. William Buckley was a very conservative, right-leaning super genius. And they had these debates that, like, you can find them on YouTube. Watch them at all costs if you haven't seen this. This is how people used to talk about politics. Incredibly eloquent. Yes, they hated each other's guts, but they did it with charm, you know. And those were the highest rated things that ABC had that year on TV. Like, it blew all their scripted shows out of the water. And that gave rise to cable news networks. Everybody was like, oh shit, there's big money in this. Up until that point, news for all network TV shows was a loss leader. They made no money on it. There was no advertising in it. It was just something that every TV network did. Here's the news, reported objectively with no spin. Then they saw this debate and they were like, shit, people love this. And it gave rise to all the cable news networks that came in the 70s and then got super fueled in the 80s. And now we are where we are, where there's 100 million of them. I'm telling you, Newsmax, if you've never seen it, it's all my parents watch. It is some of the wildest shit you can possibly imagine. It's so far beyond Fox News in terms of being like in the tank for Trump. It's insane. And it all started there with these two incredibly smart, eloquent guys talking about presidential race back in 68, I think. Anyways, for what it's worth.
I'll throw in my thesis. I think it started with Ted Turner in the 1980s, but that's just because I'm from Georgia. But I do think that the 24/7 news cycle, where you had to constantly sensationalize things and repackage them.
I'm sure Ted Turner was watching that debate, right? When he was thinking like,
100% he was.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. And to his credit, it was pretty successful. And, you know, it completely changed the way that we talk about politics, that we converse with each other. Again, and it goes beyond just like on the internet or the politicians themselves. It's how you have conversations with your family. Yeah. And so, you know, I know that Representative, you're slated to go on the necessary conversation. Chad, what is your piece of advice for Representative Gil Cisneros here as he jumps on?
Watch out for my dad. That's all I can say. I can't control him. I don't know what he's gonna do. My mom, I think, will be cordial. My dad will be a little nicer, at least in the beginning. But once he settles into it, he may yell at you. I have no idea. But yeah, we're looking forward to it. I think it'll be a fun time. I'm just gonna string together maybe like, you know, 4 or 5 things that have happened over the course of this current week politically. Okay. See what people think, you know.
All right. Well, I got a cousin or two like your dad, so I think we'll be all right.
The sailor's going to come out on this episode. Yeah. But Chad, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really a wonderful conversation. Yeah. If the opportunity ever presents itself, I will say this: I'm very interested in talking to your dad. I think it would make for a great YouTube title. So okay. You know, the thumbnail might be there. We'll set it up. But good luck, Representative.
Yeah, but we need to have you back. We didn't even get into reality TV and this whole Bachelor thing.
Oh God,
Absolutely.
Please, anytime. You have no idea. My brain is at this point just an encyclopedia of Bachelor information.
Yeah, no, I will end on this because I am curious about it. Like, why are you like what brought you to be so interested in the Bachelor? For next episode.
I just love reality TV. I think it's the most important media currently being made by America. It gave us our current president. It just fascinates me. And there's like an open lie in all dating formats that the show is just there to help people find love. But the truth is, it's this kind of like hyper complex 10-dimensional chess game that players have to play against the producers and the other players and the lead. And I was just like, is this really a game? Can I break it down mathematically and use that breakdown to train people to infiltrate it and win that game? And the answer is yes.
Wow.
Well, there you go.
Well, we have to get in there. True confession, reality TV is one of my vices, and I do watch. I probably watch too much of it.
What's your show? What's your favorite?
I like Below Deck.
Yes.
Vanderpump Rules.
Of course.
I just got done watching the last season of Love is Blind.
Yes, that season was kind of a dud, but that show is really good.
Yeah.
Well, I got recently into reality TV. I did Love Island, and I
Love
did
Island,
The Bachelor. Actually,
season 7 USA starts tonight.
Oh, I did not know that. Well, we're not sponsored by Love Island. But if you do like it, go ahead and watch it.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any of the Love Island Americas. I actually started with Love Island Australia. It's neither here nor there. We'll leave this as the teaser for the next episode.
Sounds great.
For all the listeners, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of the Who Dem podcast. For both of you, thank you so much. This was a wonderful conversation.
All right.
Thanks for having me.